Mr. President, we have a national emergency.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
All of a sudden these trees started moving out of the way. They parted for me. And then I came out into this opening, and there where I saw Jesus Christ.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. He is more imminent.
James Madison, in 1788, speaking to the Virginia Convention, said, "Since the general civilization of mankind, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachment of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations."
When men were free.
Broadcasting live from a secret location buried deep below the earth, you're about to make a connection to the signs of the times. W. Dean Shook is live on the air right now.
You have just tuned in to End Time News, and I'm W. Dean Shook, proud and privileged to be able to bring you the news the mainstream media is never going to touch. Let me say welcome to all our listeners on the iHeartRadio network, our regular broadcast affiliates, our internet connections at Blog Talk Radio Network and the Spreaker Radio Network. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it very, very much. And I've got some news for you today that's going to be very interesting. But I'd like to start with an announcement. And that is, some of you may have heard that there's rumors going around the internet that Vladimir Putin is dead. Well, Debkafile is reporting that the Kremlin press office Friday told media heads not to leave Moscow in the next few days and to stand by for an important announcement by Vladimir Putin. The CEO of the Center for Political Information, Alexei Mukhin, did not deny the president is currently incapacitated. Thursday, Russian internet sites carried rumors of Putin's death after he had not been seen in public since March 5th. The rumors were not confirmed. Mukhin's reply to the question about his death, he said, "No comment." And we'll start your regular news in just a moment. I'll be right back.
To me, without question, the most prominent, the most profound biblical prophecies that are unfolding that speak to the fact that we are very close to the return of the Lord. Number one is the return of Israel to the land. I can't stress that enough. That's a 2,500-year-old prophecy that has come to pass in our historical lifetime, the only generation to ever see that. And then, on top of that, we have several prophecies in several different places in the Old Testament speaking of once Israel is back in the land. And by the way, there were so many theologians who, when they came across those prophecies of Israel returning in the last days, they couldn't imagine that that would happen before the return of the Lord. That was such a supernatural thing. How can a people that have been gone for thousands of years and scattered to the ends of the earth, how could they return to their homeland? The world wouldn't allow it. That's what they thought. And so they said that can't happen until the Lord returns and the Lord brings his people back. But yet we see that that prophecy was meant literally, and that it has literally happened. And we have seen it happen, and we're the only generation to see it happen. And now the Bible continues to speak of once that returned Israel comes back to the land, then there will be an alignment of nations that will come against the nation of Israel to destroy it. And we're watching that unfold before us. Now with Arab Spring, the fall of Egypt, the fall of Libya, the continual civil wars and governmental strifes taking place there, the rise of ISIS, the rise of the Islamic world, the rise of the turbulence and the turmoil and terrorism in the Middle East that's spreading out its branches to Europe and even in America and other places of the world. We're watching this unfold before us, and many Bible experts and prophecy students believe that these things are happening in accordance with prophecies from God's Word. And we're watching them unfold before our eyes.
And I played that clip because I have a related story. This is a WND exclusive. End-time prophecy watchers are marveling over new reports out of Jerusalem this week that the altar of the Lord has been reconstructed by the Temple Institute. The institute, based in the old city of Jerusalem, announced it's finished building an altar that's essentially ready for use in sacrificial services. The altar is the most ambiguous project to date toward the goal of rebuilding the Jewish temple. This massive outdoor altar, which took several years to build, can be operational in little more than a moment's notice. This altar is the last major component needed for the long-obstructed sacrifices to resume in the future Jewish temple. Ultra-Orthodox Jews pray daily for its reconstruction on top of the Holy Mound known as Mount Moriah, or the Temple Mound. Bible scholars say the rebuilding of the ancient temple is predicted throughout Scripture, starting with Daniel's vision in Daniel 9:29, and Jesus echoed Daniel's warning about the abomination standing in the holy place in the last days in Matthew 24:15, followed by the Apostle John's vision in the temple in Revelation 11:1 and 2, and Paul also mentioned it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 3, and 4. Most people don't realize the temple had two altars, the altar of burnt offerings and the altar of incense. The largest was the altar of burnt offerings. Designing and built it to exact biblical specifications required quite an undertaking. Jonathan Cahn, author of The Harbinger and The Mystery of the Shemitah, also sees the announcement as very significant. He said, "We know that end-time prophecy cannot be fulfilled without the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem." Cahn, who's a Messianic Jew and rabbi in New Jersey, said the abomination of desolation prophesied in Daniel and in the Gospels must take place within the temple precincts. So too the Apostle Paul spoke of the man of sin, or the Antichrist, sitting in the temple of God. What many people don't realize is that along with the Holy of Holies, the altar of the temple is the most central and critical part of the temple. Cahn said, "It's the altar that's in the center of the abomination causing desolation." It was specifically the altar of the temple that was desecrated by Antiochus that compromised the first abomination, desolation, and the foreshadowing of what will take place in the end times, he said. So any progress made toward the rebuilding of the altar is worthy of our attention. And you can find that full story posted on the website at wdeanshook.com right after the program. And here's one that I bet you haven't heard yet. According to the Times of Israel out of Caracas, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez has said that the U.S. is laying a legal groundwork to wage war against the South American country. The administration of U.S. President Barack Obama is seeking congressional approval to attack any country that doesn't serve its interests, Rodriguez said. At a hearing in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday, the White House asked lawmakers to grant extensive power to fight the Islamic State anywhere in the world, which, according to Rodriguez, leaves the door open to a military campaign in Venezuela. He said Thursday the U.S. is preparing to declare war on all countries because requesting authorization to use military force without a geographic restrictions mean they can invade any country, the minister said. He also called on Venezuelans to prepare for a U.S. embargo against Venezuela's trade, finance, and economy, similar to the one Washington imposed on Cuba more than 50 years ago. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has called on the country to unite to prepare for U.S. aggression and asked Parliament to give him the right to rule by decree for 6 months so his government can quickly react to any threats. In a nationwide televised address on Monday, Maduro said that the U.S. president had taken the most aggressive step against his country. And just a couple days later, out of the Washington Times, it's reporting the Obama administration has imposed sanctions against 7 high-ranking Venezuelan officials Monday, and it accused Mr. Maduro of human rights abuses. It demanded the release of all political prisoners, including opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez, who was detained since February of 2014, and Caracas Mayor Antonio Ledesma, who the government accuses of plotting a coup. Latin American leaders have rallied around embattled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as relations between Washington and Caracas have plunged to a new low. Governments from Havana to Buenos Aires have denounced Mr. Obama's executive order labeling Venezuelan as a national security threat as unwelcomed U.S. meddling in regional affairs. Mr. Maduro, a former bus driver and union leader who succeeded the populist Chavez in 2013, fired back that the U.S. imperialist elite was trying to topple his government. Venezuela's allies across the Western Hemisphere has supported that view. Ecuador called the U.S. order an unacceptable attack on Venezuela's sovereignty, and Cuba, in the midst of the efforts to mend ties with the United States, assured Caracas of its unconditional support. In recent months, Venezuela has been marked by violent repression and protests, price inflation nearly 70%, plunging oil revenue with falling global prices, and long lines at grocery stores have led to severe shortages of basic household goods. They went on to say the attitude of the United States is absolutely exaggerated and surprising. Mr. Godoy said in an interview, acknowledging that he was troubled by some incidents in Venezuela. The senator insisted that there were internal matters and that the rule of law was intact. And this story goes much deeper, will also be posted on the website. And here's a story about our privacy that I think everybody needs to be aware of. There was a mysterious spy cameras collecting data at a post office in Denver. This, according to Fox 31, within an hour of Fox 31 discovering a hidden camera which was positioned to capture and record the license plate and facial features of customers leaving a Golden post office. The device was ripped from the ground and disappeared. Here's a clip of this story.
A spy camera controversy at the post office. We found hidden cameras in use at offices around Denver, gathering information without your knowledge. Thanks for staying with us at 9:30. I'm Deborah Takahara.
And I'm Boris Sanchez. Tonight, only on Fox 31 Denver, investigative reporter Chris Halsney reveals how spy programs are now tracking who you're communicating with via snail mail.
The next time you drop off packages at the U.S. Post Office, keep an eye out for hidden cameras as you leave. Here in Golden, we caught the U.S. Postal Inspection Service capturing everybody's license plates, then pairing that information with a picture of the person's face.
This camera lens and recording device wasn't easy to spot. Managers at the Golden Post Office branch on Johnson Road didn't even know it was on their property until Fox 31 Denver pointed it out. Witnesses say from around Thanksgiving through the busy holiday season and into January, it snapped pictures, thousands of them, of everyone driving a vehicle out the single-lane exit. Customers were not informed in any way.
I'm not sure that I can do anything about it, whether I agree with it or not, frankly. It's just part of the data that's being collected, and where it goes, it's hard to tell.
I don't think that it's America that we should be safe doing what we do and not being watched every minute of every day.
Within an hour of Fox 31 Denver asking the law enforcement branch of the U.S. Postal Service why the camera was snapping away month after month, the surveillance device was ripped from the ground and disappeared. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service sent us a statement after refusing an on-camera explanation. It says cameras are deployed for security of our facilities, safety of our customers and employees, or for criminal investigations. Employees of the Postal Inspection Service are sworn to uphold the Constitution, including protecting the privacy of the American public. Our discovery of this camera program comes just months after the post office was forced to reveal during congressional hearings that it was videotaping and storing the address and return information from billions of pieces of mail. A federal audit in 2014 found that the post office had insufficient controls in place when allowing law enforcement agencies access to the data collected from that mail cover program.
Part of being a responsible constitutional government is explaining why it's surveilling its citizens.
Lee Tien is an attorney for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He says citizens may be getting used to security cameras watching them, but The government tracking movements, then recording and keeping those for future law enforcement snooping is something EFF thinks should come with strict rules.
The government generally shouldn't be collecting this kind of sensitive information, and it is sensitive because it's about your relationships, and the idea that we give up the privacy in that simply because we use the U.S. mails is, I think, a silly idea.
Fox 31 Denver scoured county, state, and federal courts for search warrants authorizing the collection of license plates and pictures of customers' faces, but we couldn't find any criminal case to explain it. Our requests for a written policy on retention time periods of images of innocent customers captured here so far have been ignored.
Well, since I don't have anything to hide, I don't really care, but I don't like the idea of it.
The ongoing mystery bothered most Golden Post Office customers we spoke with, but not all of them.
If it was a little more personal, like reading into my text messages and stuff like that for no real reason, then that's something I'd be a little more alarmed about, but just general surveillance like that for everyone, kind of, no.
We did find a California company who claims it sold the U.S. Postal Service consumer surveillance systems, complete with wireless data retrieval and infrared night capabilities. The company would not return our calls. And so far, our numerous federal Freedom of Information Act requests to get contract and financial information about that reported deal and other camera deals have turned up nothing.
All right, Chris, great story there. The big question, though, there are security cameras everywhere, as you mentioned in the story. But there's a distinction here between what the federal government is doing with these cameras and security cameras, let's say at 7-Eleven, for example. What's the difference?
Well, the attorneys out there who are dealing with issues of freedom say that just being on camera is one thing, but when the government starts collecting that over a long period of time with no rules about how long they can keep it, who they can share it with, and how they can use it without a judge overseeing it, can create problems down the road for privacy.
Sure. All right, Chris Halsney, thanks so much.
Attorney now.
And what is really disturbing here is the camera program comes just months after the U.S. Postal Service was forced to reveal during a congressional hearing that it was videotaping and storing the addresses and return information for billions of pieces of mail at its distribution center. All right, and I'd like to touch on this Ferguson situation here. I know it's kind of worn out, but there's something strange going on here. With the DOJ investigation, talking about disarming the Ferguson Police Department, then one witness told CNN the bullets, about 4 of them, came from a nearby hill rather than from the crowd of protesters. Police still don't have suspects or leads. The police chief said, "I don't know who did the shooting, to be honest with you," adding that the trajectory of the bullets indicated that these shots were exactly at my officers. Now, folks, you can call this conspiracy theory, but are they saying that this came from a nearby hill, like a grassy knoll? In a recent comment, President Obama seemed to shrug the whole thing off and was more concerned about the racism that's being charged against the Ferguson police. Well, here's another WND with an interview from a city clerk who says the Ferguson shooting was a setup by cops. An official of a nearby village who appeared in Ferguson, Missouri this week to protest in the aftermath of the shooting say the entire scenario was a setup that was probably designed to put police back into favor. Here's a clip of that interview.
Sean, about 200 people here gathered in a circle right opposite where those 2 policemen were shot. We've been talking to people, getting their different points of view who've come out to protest tonight after the shooting. We've got John Muhammad with us tonight, a young man who is a city manager in a nearby town. 2 policemen shot 40 yards over there. Simple question, your reaction to that shooting?
I think it was a complete setup. I think it was a setup between members of the police fraternities, what I like to call it. I think they operate just like the KKK. I think they did it to make themselves think they're the victim. When honestly the victim are black people. I think it's just a publicity stunt, no more than that.
So who shot the police?
I don't know. Maybe KKK. I don't know. They're brothers. I wouldn't know.
This was done to instigate, to throw a wrench into things. Why?
Because it puts them back in power and in control. It puts them back in a favor.
You have a pretty important position as a city manager. Do your constituents feel that way?
I'm not sure. I speak for myself. My constituents speak for themselves.
Do you think this thing's going to get bigger?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because nothing is going to die down. We have a motto, and it's called "We cannot stop." We can't stop now. We have to keep pushing this issue forward because this is a major problem that black men, black women are being shot down and killed by white police officers, sometimes black, because the problem is not always these white people. It is, but it's not.
When you say push forward, do you mean in a peaceful manner or any manner necessary?
Police can answer that question. I can't. Police can only answer that.
Do you mean respond to force with force?
I mean defend yourself at all times.
So not a strictly nonviolent movement? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just asking where you're coming from.
No, I get it.
Because a lot of protesters here have told us this shooting is an outrage. It has nothing to do with us. We don't want any part of it. We're upset by it. Other people have said, hey, it's a punch for a punch. They got what they deserved. And I'm looking for people's points of view. I'm trying to figure out yours.
Absolutely.
Where's this going?
I think this is going to be a major movement until things get settled the way it's supposed to, until justice actually comes to black people, until justice comes to Mike Brown. Things are not going to stop.
Now, the Fox interviewer identified the man as a city manager of a nearby town. Online records show that John C. Mohammed is linked to the village of Uplands Park, which is not far from Ferguson. The receptionist at a telephone number listed for Uplands Park told WND Friday that Mohammed is a city clerk, not a manager, that his opinions are his own and did not represent the small community. And I think you can take those two stories for what they are. And much like we talked about in our last update, it seems that the government has some fresh warnings of an impending terrorist attack. According to Breitbart News, top U.S. General John Kelly, commander of the U.S. Southern Command, warned lawmakers that Sunni extremists are radicalizing converts and other Muslims in Latin America, adding that the Islamic State may exploit traffickers in the region to infiltrate the United States. Here's what General John Kelly said.
Sean, about 200 people here gathered in a circle right opposite where those two policemen were shot. We've been talking to people, getting their different points of view who've come out to protest tonight after the shooting. We've got John Muhammad with us tonight, a young man who is a city manager in a nearby town. Two policemen shot 40 yards over there. Simple question, your reaction to that shooting?
I think it was a complete setup. I think it was a setup between members of the police fraternity, is what I like to call it. I think they operate just like the KKK. I think they did it to make themselves seem like they're the victim, when honestly the victim are black people. I think it's just a publicity stunt, no more than that.
So who shot the police?
I don't know. Maybe KKK? I don't know. They're brothers? I wouldn't know.
This was done to instigate, to throw a wrench into things? Why?
Because it puts them back in power and in control. It puts them back in a favor.
You have a pretty important position as a city manager. Do your constituents